For those people who haven't been joining with us over the last few weeks, for the last 3 weeks we've been looking at this intensive 24-hour period in the life of Jesus. 24 hours from midday to midday, covered by Mark chapters 4 and 5. Although we did look at a prologue in Mark chapter 3 and notice that even before this 24-hour period hit, Jesus was already physically and emotionally drained by lots of different things that were happening. And as this illustration that I showed last week sort of highlights, a lot happens in this 24-hour period in the Gospel of Mark. It's also in the Gospel of Luke and the Gospel of Matthew. There's just so much packed in here. Jesus experiences a non-stop 24 hours of teaching and explaining and travelling and engaging and healing. Being the compassionate person that Jesus was, the caring person that he was, he just keeps pushing himself, continues to respond to the needs and the requests of the people until, as we heard last week, about two-thirds of the way into this 24-hour period, Jesus hits the wall and is just totally exhausted and tells his disciples, let's go to the other side of the lake to get away from these crowds. And as soon as he gets into the boat, he falls asleep. But as we also heard last week in the gospel reading, unfortunately it was broken sleep because Jesus got woken up to calm the sea during that storm. Have you ever experienced broken sleep? Have you had periods in your life where you've struggled with broken sleep? Our 3 kids are beautiful, but when they were first born, between the ages of 0 and 2, none of them were good sleepers. And for 6 years straight, Maren and I got woken up 2 to 3 times a night, every night, by our kids. And that broken sleep just wears you down. It just wears you down. And if you are currently experiencing broken sleep at the moment, my heart goes out to you because I know what that's like. And so Jesus had experienced in this state of exhaustion, broken sleep. I don't know if you've noticed that the graphics that I've found for this sermon series, but I thought the one for today was absolutely perfect. It sort of shows Jesus in this last part of the 24-hour period, continuing to do ministry. But have a close look at his face here. I just love it. I thought the artist got it perfect. It's almost like Jesus going, yeah, I'm tired. His hair's a bit of a mess, but he's still going. He's like, yeah, I'm tired. I'm going. I'm okay. I'm just got to keep going here. But you can sort of see in that face that sense of, I just want to have a rest. So let's jump in and have a closer look at this last 8 hours of this 24-hour period that we've been working through. After the overnight storm, the boat that was going to the other side of the lake took a lot longer than the 2 hours that they originally planned. It probably got pushed off course by the storm, and they arrive at the other side of the lake just as dawn is breaking. And as they get there, they're not met by the crowd, which is good because they went there to get away from the crowd, but they are met there by a single person whom Mark describes as a demon-possessed or crazy person. And I really do wish I had more time to unpack this part of the story, to talk about inclusion and exclusion and fear versus caring and why the pigs jumped in the lake. There's so much to talk about here, but I can't because I've got other stuff to talk about today. Maybe I need to come back and do a whole sermon on this particular passage because it really is an interesting passage to dig down deeper into. But I do want to, just as I'm passing past this passage, do a quick observation that connects with our larger theme we've been looking at over the last month about work, life and family balance. I did find it funny that at the end of this story, when Jesus has done this miracle with this man and helped this person struggling with mental health and inner demons for years to find peace, you would think that the locals who were around would be, excited by that they would be, so keen to discover that Jesus can do this, that they would have, just like the crowds on the other side of the lake, be lining up with Jesus with their own issues, with their own people who needed help, with their own requests for healing and peace. You would think that would be happening, but it doesn't. Instead, the people on this side of the lake, it says in this passage here that they were afraid. And they actually pleaded with Jesus to go away, to leave. Why? When Jesus has the potential and the power to transform their lives and their communities, why are they asking Jesus to leave? Love a theory. Often when we are busy or tired, the thing we fear the most is change. See, when things change, we've got to deal with a whole bunch more stuff. We've got to, adapt to the change, and that can be more draining. And sometimes we just sort of wish that we can just remain in the status quo. And I wonder whether it was similar in this case. Rather than see the good that Jesus was offering, the town folks were only seeing the complications that Jesus was bringing, like the pig-a-lanch, or how what do we do now with this non-crazy man? And I wonder, rather than taking the time to embrace the possibilities of what Jesus was bringing them, they were just overwhelmed with the disruption that Jesus was bringing to their normal lives. And maybe they asked Jesus to leave with the hope that if Jesus went away, then things would just get back to normal again. Did we ever fall into that trap? That in our busyness and juggling so many balls that we do in our normal day lives, are we tempted that when God is trying to do a new thing in our lives or in our situations to say to God, not now. Maybe when things settle down, I'll be more open to the new thing that you're trying to do, but I just can't handle any change at the moment. Not now. Maybe later. Maybe later. Anyway, let's jump back to the text because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. Moving through the text, we get to the second part, which is the actual lectionary reading for today, the miracle on the way to the miracle. And once again, I want to just zoom in on this and focus on this discussion of work, life and family balance. And I want to talk about the issue of interruptions. So if we catch ourselves up, Jesus and his disciples, after being asked to leave that region, travel back to where they came from. Remember, it's about a 2-hour journey. They probably, 10 o'clock, they're getting back to that side of the lake. And guess who is waiting for them when they get back? Yes, the crowd is still there. The crowd is still there and waiting for Jesus. And basically, as soon as they get off the boat, it says that the crowd, is still there, pressing in, gathering around him, pleading for help. And as the crowd presses in, Jairus, one of the religious leaders, approaches Jesus and asks Jesus for help with his daughter who is dying. I don't know if you put two and two together here, but if you remember back in the first week in Mark chapter 3, Jairus is probably one of the same religious leaders who was calling Jesus, a spawn of Satan, basically, in that week. Less than, or probably just over 24 hours before this was happening. And now he comes to Jesus asking for help. So how does Jesus respond? Remember, these are the people who were putting him down only a day before. And yet Jesus responds with no sarcasm or spite, but rather with compassion and grace. Jesus immediately goes with Jairus to his home. We don't know what plans Jesus had for that morning. They were obviously coming back for something, but we don't know what the plans were. But we know that Jairus' request for his daughter suddenly took precedence. Jesus changed his plans and response to Jairus. And the crowd continues to surge, and even though Jesus is going off with Jairus, they all go with him as well, and they're pressing in, and we hear the next part of the story. And I really would love to focus on the amazing courage and faith and perseverance of this unnamed woman as she reaches out and finds healing with Jesus. But unfortunately, her part of the narrative doesn't fit into my work, family, life balance discussion either. But I want to say that this woman is amazing. Her understanding of who Jesus is and what Jesus can offer her is just amazing. And then to have the faith to reach out and to take that healing, to accept that healing from Jesus. She's an extraordinary woman, and I just wanted to say that. But I actually need to switch over to verse 30, and that's what I want to zoom in on. So verse 30 says, "At once Jesus realised that the power had gone out of him and asked, 'Who touched my clothes?'" Who touched my clothes? I did find this interesting. You know, we've been talking about this sense of running on empty. And Jesus certainly is running on empty. And even when he tried to get some sleep in the boat, it was broken sleep. And so, you know, his inner tanks would still be not very full. And yet he has this experience where he feels the power draining from him. Now, maybe Jesus does have this super, sense of when a miracle is happening, and that's what he's experiencing. But I also wonder whether it could just be simply as I'm already feeling drained, and I'm feeling somebody calling upon me again, and asking for the little that I have left in my tank. I also just wanted to zoom in on this whole aspect of interruptions. Remember that Jesus is going to Jairus' place, and he is walking with a purpose. Our little girl is dying. He's got a purpose. And this experience with this amazing woman is an interruption, albeit a worthy and important interruption, but an interruption nevertheless. And I just thought it's worthwhile just spending a few moments reflecting upon how does Jesus deal with this interruption. Because, you know, his compassion and caring kicks in yet again, and he stops and he looks around and he keeps looking for the person who has reached out in faith to him. And when she comes forward, Jesus actually takes time to listen to her story as she explains to him the truth. We don't know how long this interruption goes for, but it was during this time that Jesus is talking to this woman that the other members of Jairus' household come up and say that it's too late, that his daughter has died. And so you sort of get this picture that this interruption has been not helpful in Jesus going to Jairus' place and healing his daughter. Now, we could argue, well, that's okay. Jesus knew that he was going to heal Jairus' daughter anyway, so it was fine for him to stop and to interact with the woman. But we've been tying this back to us all the time, and we don't have that luxury. We don't have the luxury of being able to look in the future. And so in the relation to this life-family balance question, my question that I came up with was, how did Jesus know that this was a good thing to stop for? And therefore, in our own situation, how do we respond to interruptions? How do we decide whether to keep focused on the task at hand, i.e. in Jesus' case, going to Jairus' house, or whether this interruption is important and we need to stop and focus on that? You know what I'm talking about, don't you? Surely we all live in a world where there is non-stop interruptions. When we are focused on one thing and another thing just pushes its way in and demands our attention. How do we decide how we deal with interruptions? And I guess it depends on what the interruption is. I did find it a little ironic that as I was writing this sermon on Friday, I had non-stop interruptions of people trying to work out what this COVID situation was going to be. And even yesterday, as I'm trying to finish off my sermon and get all the service ready, it was, once again, interruptions all day with people questioning and we're trying to work out how does this work for tomorrow. And I'm sitting there going, I'm trying to focus on a sermon about dealing with interruptions and all I'm being is interrupted. But it was a catch-22 because both were important. Writing my sermon and finishing that for today was important. But so was the requests and the conversations and the phone calls that were coming in. They were both important. So how do we decide what to do if both are important? I'm assuming that you've heard many theories about the difference between the urgent and the important. Things like the Eisenhower matrix, and there's a number of other frameworks that try to distinguish between what is important in life and what is urgent in life, and how do we look at something and try to work out where do we need to place our focus. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Eisenhower matrix, have a read through it, it's really good. But basically what they're trying to say is that the important stuff is the bigger picture stuff, the goals that we have, that we are moving through, whether that's in our work or in our life or in our relationships. But the urgent things are the things that sort of scream out now to us and demand that we look at them. And we can fall into the trap of thinking that we need to deal with all the urgent stuff because they're the loudest. And the important stuff we'll always get back to, but sometimes we're so busy dealing with the urgent that we never get to the important. And modern technologies like our phones and instant messages treats all information as urgent and pressing. And we're starting to get to the stage that we're becoming desensitized because we're always on, we're always ready to respond. And this desensitization is causing us to be less able to discern the difference between what is truly important and what is merely urgent. And I myself have to admit that I struggle with this. I think it's also got a part to do with my personality because I'm non-stop anyway, but I'm finding that I've got a bad habit of only focusing on whatever is in my field of vision because I can deal with that, it's in front of me. And so, I'll have this situation where I'm just about to go off to the hospital to visit somebody in the hospital, and somebody will come to my door and say, "Oh, do you have a moment just to chat?" And I will say yes, because they're there in front of me in my field of vision, and I can deal with that right in front of me. And I'll say, well, I can always get back to the hospital later, but sometimes that doesn't happen. And I don't know if I do much of a valuation between, all right, well, is this interruption important to stop my plans of going to the hospital? Because sometimes it will be, but sometimes maybe it isn't. And I don't know if it's just always wise to deal with the thing right in front of me. So how did Jesus know that the interruption of the woman was an important interruption that was worth stopping for, that was worth investing time into? Because that's what I want to know. I want to know, how did Jesus work out that this interruption was a good interruption? And therefore, if I can work that out, I can work out what it means in my own life. How do I discern where to spend the best time, where to spend my focus? Do I let this interruption interrupt? As I said, you can Google the Eisenhower matrix and use some of those tools. But I wondered whether in Jesus' case it was actually the prompting of the Holy Spirit that helped Jesus, or the prompting of God. You see, I don't think that Jesus needed to know that the woman was healed. She was quietly reaching out in faith. And the Bible tells us that as soon as she touched the hem of his coat, she was healed. Everything was okay at that point. Jesus didn't need to stop. And yet, I wonder whether Jesus had a prompting of God, of the Holy Spirit, to say, no, this is actually important. Stop, turn around, find this person, talk to them. This is important. Maybe this was simply that sense of, Jesus feeling the power, being drained from him was God's way of saying, I need you to stop and I need you to talk to this person. I've talked about this before in church here, but I read one commentary that talks about how this woman, her needs was not only to be healed, but to be included again, because her medical condition would have clashed with the religious laws of being clean and unclean. And she possibly was excluded from all religious events and most social events for the past, 12 years or whatever length of time that she had this disease. And by publicly acknowledging her healing, Jesus was not only affirming her faith, but saying to the community gathered around, this person is healed. She can be included now. And that's important enough to stop. So maybe Jesus' ability to work out how to deal with an interruption is simply just going, I need to listen to what God wants me to do here. I need to be open to the promptings of the Spirit, even if it means, in this case, because he invested the time here, he then needed to invest another miracle in raising Jairus' daughter over there. And the clock strikes midday. And that's the end of our 24 hours. The 24-hour period ends. Mark chapter 6 begins with Jesus going home, most likely to sleep for 2 days. And then it says in verse 2 that the Sabbath came, how many days later that is. But certainly this crazy 24-hour period that we've looked at in these 2 chapters has ended. So what did we learn? What did we get out of these 4 weeks that we've been looking at here? Is the moral of these 4 weeks just to keep pushing hard and everything will work out in the end? I don't think that that's the message to get out of this. There certainly has been some good wisdom as we've worked through these 4 weeks. We need to discern the right balance between the expectations of our work and our family and of others and even of what we need ourselves, and make sure that we don't get those things out of balance, because when we do, we can run ourselves down. And we shouldn't run ourselves down too much because we don't know what's around the corner. We don't know when the storm's going to hit, so we should always leave a little in the tank. And we need to take time to rest and to refill our inner tank. To be still. And if the storms do hit, we can always call upon the one who has the power to bring peace or stillness to the storms in a way that's beyond our understanding. And maybe from today we can learn that are we too busy to embrace the things that God is doing or wants to do in our lives? And how do we discern the difference between the important and the urgent? How do we work out good ways of dealing with interruptions? But for me, I think it comes back to the very last point that I made. This idea of having the space in our lives to be able to hear that still small voice of God, prompting us, helping us in our decision making, whatever that might be. So whatever the message God has stirred within you for this series, it is my prayer that in the midst of whatever the world or this week or this lockdown throws at us, whether our seas are calm or whether we're in the midst of a storm, that we might be like Jairus or the woman of faith and know that we can always reach out to Jesus for help. After all, Jesus is the one who can teach us about life, who can listen to our questions, who can tell our storms to be still, who can bring peace to our troubled minds, who can heal with the touch, and even bring the things that we thought that were dead back to life. All we have to do is reach out. Amen.